The lighthouse at Keeper's Point had stood for 147 years, watching over the rocky coast of Maine like a silent sentinel. Its red and white striped tower rose 70 feet above the churning Atlantic, a beacon of safety for ships navigating the treacherous shoals that had claimed dozens of vessels over the centuries. And for the past 5 years, Admiral William Hartford had been its keeper, though some in town whispered he was more its prisoner. On this gray October morning, the fog rolled in thick as cotton wool. William stood at the top of the lighthouse, as he did every dawn, his weathered hands gripping the iron railing. At 75, his body still carried the rigid posture of his 40 years in the Navy. But his eyes held something his uniform never had: regret. He scanned the horizon for what, he wasn't sure anymore. Ships that needed guidance? Or perhaps forgiveness that would never come? The letter had arrived 3 days ago. He'd read it once, then locked it in his mahogany desk drawer, the same desk that had belonged to his father, and his father's father before him. But the words burned in his mind like a beacon he couldn't extinguish. Dear Admiral Hartford, I regret to inform you that your son, James Hartford, passed away in a car accident on September 15. 20 years. 20 years since their last words. The memory played in his mind like a broken record. James standing in this very lighthouse, eyes blazing with defiance, declaring he would be an artist, not a naval officer. William's response had been equally fierce: then you're no son of mine. The door had slammed. James had driven away, and William had stood alone in the lighthouse, too proud to call him back. Now, it was too late. Far too late. William was mending fishing nets on the lighthouse dock when he heard the sound of tires on gravel. Visitors were rare at Keeper's Point. The lighthouse was automated now. He lived there, by special arrangement with the Coast Guard, more caretaker than keeper. Most days, the only company he had were the seagulls, and the occasional lobsterman checking his traps. He looked up to see a silver sedan navigating the narrow access road. The car pulled to a stop near the keeper's cottage, and a woman stepped out. She was in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a navy peacoat. Exhaustion was written in every line of her face, the kind of weariness that came not from lack of sleep, but from carrying a burden too heavy for one person. William set down his nets and stood, instinctively, straightening his flannel shirt. Old habits died hard. The woman opened the back door of the sedan, and 2 small figures emerged. Identical twin girls, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, both wearing matching red raincoats. They stood close to the woman, eyeing the lighthouse and the old man with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The woman walked toward him, the girls trailing behind like cautious ducklings. When she was a few feet away, she stopped and took a deep breath. "Admiral Hartford?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "That's what my uniform used to say," William replied gruffly, not quite meeting her eyes. "Just William now. I'm Sarah. Sarah Hartford." She paused, and William felt his chest tighten. "I was James's wife." The fishing net slipped from William's hands, hitting the wooden dock with a soft thud. Slowly, as if moving through water, he raised his eyes to look at her properly. Then his gaze shifted to the girls. They both had James's dark curly hair. They both had those distinctive green eyes, the eyes William's late wife Margaret had passed down. The eyes he saw in his own mirror every morning. The eyes he'd seen in James's face, before pride and stubbornness had driven them apart. James was married? William's voice came out barely above a whisper. "For 12 years, Sarah replied. "These are your granddaughters, Emma and Lily. They're 10 years old." The girls stared at him with wide eyes. William realized he must look like something from a sailor's nightmare: wild gray beard that he'd stopped trimming months ago, face weathered by sea wind and sun, hands rough as driftwood. His flannel shirt had a hole in the elbow, and his boots were caked with dried mud. I didn't know," William managed. "James didn't want you to know," Sarah said. And there was no accusation in her voice, only sad acceptance. "He said you'd made your position clear 20 years ago." William flinched as if she'd struck him. Because she was right. He had made his position clear. Crystal clear. One of the girls, Emma or Lily, he couldn't tell which, tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Mama, I'm cold." Sarah looked down at her daughter with such tender concerned that William felt something crack inside his chest. It was the same way Margaret used to look at James when he was small. Perhaps, Sarah began hesitantly, we could talk inside? William nodded stiffly and led them toward the keeper's cottage, a sturdy two-story building attached to the base of the lighthouse. He opened the heavy oak door original to the lighthouse, 147 years old, and ushered them into the front room. The cottage was exactly what one might expect of a solitary old sailor. Functional, sparse, and meticulously organized. Nautical charts covered one wall. A stone fireplace dominated another, with a ship's clock ticking steadily above the mantel. The furniture was simple: a worn leather sofa, 2 wooden chairs, a bookshelf filled with maritime histories and navigation manuals. But what caught everyone's attention was the painting hanging above the fireplace. It showed this very lighthouse at sunset. The sky aflame with orange and purple, the sea a deep sapphire. The brushwork was bold and alive, capturing not just the scene but the feeling of standing on these rocks, breathing the salt air, hearing the eternal conversation between wind and waves. That's Daddy's painting, one of the twins said softly. William turned to look at it, really look at it, for the first time in months. He'd found it at an estate sale 2 years ago. Had bought it because something about it called to him. Only later had he noticed the small signature in the corner: J. Hartford. His son had painted this. His son, the artist he'd disowned, had captured the lighthouse that William loved, with more truth and beauty than William had ever been able to express. James painted this? William asked, though he already knew the answer. He painted dozens of lighthouses, Sarah said, settling the girls on the sofa. Up and down the coast. But he always said Keeper's Point was special. He said it was home. William felt his throat tighten. He turned away, busying himself with the kettle on the small stove. I'll make tea. As the water heated, Sarah spoke. Her voice was calm, but William could hear the tremor beneath it. I should tell you why we're here. James and I, we had a good life. A happy life. He was a wonderful father. He taught art at the local high school and painted on weekends. We had a small house in Rockport, nothing fancy, but it was ours. William kept his back turned, gripping the edge of the counter. 3 months ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months, maybe less. William's head snapped around. Sarah was looking at her daughters, not at him, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I have no family left. My parents died years ago. James was an only child, and after you too. She trailed off, then continued. I need to know my girls will be taken care of. They need family. They need their grandfather. The kettle began to whistle, but William didn't move. He stared at this woman, his son's widow, his daughters-in-law, and at the 2 little girls who were his own flesh and blood. Strangers, all of them. Strangers because of his pride. His unforgiving pride. You want me to take them? He finally said. I want you to know them, Sarah replied, meeting his eyes. Before it's too late. James never stopped loving you, you know. He kept every letter you sent before the fight. He told the girls stories about growing up here, about learning to sail, about watching storms from the lighthouse gallery. He wanted to reconcile, but he was afraid you'd reject him again. And then after so many years, it seemed impossible. William turned off the stove and slowly walked to the window. Outside, the fog was beginning to lift, revealing glimpses of the gray-green ocean. A lobster boat chugged past, its engine a distant rumble. I don't know how to be a grandfather, he said to the glass. Maybe you could start by being a person, Sarah said gently. That's all they need. Sarah and the girls stayed that night in the lighthouse cottage. William gave them the 2 small bedrooms on the 2nd floor, rooms that hadn't been used in years, still furnished with the simple beds and dressers from when the lighthouse keepers' families had lived here full-time. He dusted and swept and changed the sheets while Sarah unpacked their suitcases. The girls wandered through the cottage like cautious explorers, touching nothing, speaking in whispers. William lay awake most of that night in his own room on the ground floor, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people in his home, footsteps overhead, water running in the bathroom, soft voices saying good night. He had grown so accustomed to solitude. How could he possibly take care of 2 children? He was 75 years old. He could barely take care of himself. But morning came, as it always did, with the pale light of dawn filtering through the fog. William rose at 5:30, as was his custom, and climbed to the top of the lighthouse. From here, he could see 5 miles in every direction when the weather was clear. Today, the visibility was poor, but he could make out the familiar landmarks, the rocky point to the north, the small harbor town to the south, the endless Atlantic to the east. This had been his ritual for 5 years. Solitary, contemplative, his way of atoning for a mistake he could never fix. Except perhaps it wasn't too late after all. When he climbed back down, he found Sarah in the kitchen, attempting to navigate his Spartan cooking supplies. "There's not much here," she said apologetically. "I was going to make pancakes for the girls, but you only have canned soup and crackers." William felt his face grow warm. "I don't keep much food. I eat at the diner in town most days. The girls will need proper meals. And school supplies, they've been out for 3 weeks now. And clothes, they're growing so fast." Sarah pressed her fingers to her temples. "I'm sorry. I'm overwhelmed. There's so much to arrange, and I'm—" She didn't finish, but William understood. She was running out of time. "Make a list," he heard himself say. "We'll go into town this morning." So they did. All 4 of them crowded into William's ancient pickup truck, Sarah in the passenger seat, the twins in the back, bouncing on the worn bench seat. It was a 30-minute drive to Port Haven, the nearest town of any size. William hadn't been shopping for anyone but himself in decades. He felt completely out of his depth in the brightly lit aisles of the grocery store, staring at the bewildering array of cereals and snacks. "Do children still eat oatmeal?" he asked Sarah. "Some do, but these 2 prefer Emma. Lily, what do you want?" The girls, who had been silent and shy all morning, suddenly came to life in the cereal aisle. They debated the merits of various sugary options with the seriousness of naval strategists. William found himself almost smiling. They filled 2 carts: food, clothes, school supplies, books, art materials. Sarah insisted on the art materials, and even some games and puzzles for rainy days. At the checkout, the bill came to over $300. William didn't hesitate, pulling out his wallet. Money wasn't a problem. His Navy pension and investments had left him comfortable. It was everything else that felt impossible. As they loaded the truck, a voice called out, "Admiral Hartford? Is that you?" William turned to see Pastor Tom Chen from the community church approaching with a warm smile. Tom was in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Tom," William acknowledged with a nod. "I haven't seen you in town in weeks. And who are these lovely young ladies?" Before William could respond, Sarah stepped forward and made the introductions. Tom's expression shifted from surprise to understanding to something like joy. "Your granddaughters. William, this is wonderful news. Though I'm sorry to hear about James. He must have noticed the letter in the local obituaries. He was a talented artist. I have one of his paintings in my office." "You do?" William was surprised. "Of course. Morning light on Pemaquid Point. It's beautiful." Tom looked at the girls. "Your father had a real gift." "Emma, or was it Lily?" said quietly, "We like to draw too." "Then you must have inherited his talent. You know, we have a youth art class at the church on Saturday mornings. You girls might enjoy it." The twins looked at Sarah hopefully. She glanced at William, who found himself nodding. "We'll see," Sarah said. As they drove back to the lighthouse, William noticed that the girls seemed less tense. They pointed out seals on the rocks and boats in the harbor, their voices no longer whispered but excited. That evening, after a dinner of spaghetti which William learned was a favorite, Sarah announced she needed to return to Rockport for a few days to handle some business. She would leave the girls with William. "Are you sure?" William asked, panic creeping into his voice. "They need to get to know you," Sarah said firmly. "And I need to meet with doctors and lawyers. I'll be back in 3 days." So William found himself alone with 2 10-year-old girls who were strangers to him, and he to them. The first night was awkward. William made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner, one of the few meals he knew how to prepare, and they ate in silence. Afterward, he had no idea what to do. "Homework," he suggested. "Mama said we could have a break from school this week," Emma replied. "Television? You don't have one," Lily pointed out. This was true. William had never bothered with television. He read books and listened to the weather radio. "Would you like to see the lighthouse?" he finally asked. The girls' faces brightened. Can we go to the very top? If you're not afraid of heights. We're not afraid of anything, Emma declared, and William believed her. He led them up the spiral staircase, 147 iron steps, worn smooth by generations of keepers' feet. The girls climbed with enthusiasm, their footsteps echoing in the cylindrical space. At the top, they emerged into the lantern room, a glass-enclosed space surrounding the massive lighthouse lens. Though the light was automated now, William still kept the brass polished and the glass spotless. Wow, Lily breathed, pressing her face to the glass. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. This is where your great-great-great-grandfather stood, William told them. He was the first keeper of this lighthouse, back in 1876. And his son after him, and his son after that. Your great-grandfather, my father, was keeper until 1965. And then you? Emma asked. No, I went into the Navy. I spent 40 years at sea, on ships, commanding men. But I always thought about this place. He paused. Your father used to love coming up here as a boy. He'd bring his sketchbook and draw for hours. Why did you and Daddy stop talking? Lily asked with the directness of a child. William was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Because I was foolish. I thought there was only one right way to live my way. When your father wanted to choose his own path, I couldn't accept it. I thought I was teaching him about duty and honor, but really, I was just being stubborn and proud. Mama says pride is one of the 7 deadly sins, Emma said. Your mama is a wise woman. They stood in silence, watching the stars begin to appear. The lighthouse beam rotated automatically on for 3 seconds, off for 3 seconds, a rhythm as reliable as a heartbeat. Tell us more stories about Daddy when he was little, Lily said. So William did. He told them about James learning to sail in the small dinghy, about the time he rescued a seal pup. Tangled in fishing line, about the elaborate sandcastles he used to build on the beach below the lighthouse. The memories came flooding back, and with them, the ache of loss. But also something else, the joy of sharing James with these 2 girls who loved him, who missed him, who kept him alive in their hearts. When they finally climbed back down, it was past the girls' bedtime. But as they settled into their beds, Emma asked, can we do that again tomorrow? Go to the top and talk? Every night, if you like, William promised. And so a routine began to form. William woke early and climbed the lighthouse while the girls still slept. He'd returned to make breakfast. He was getting better at pancakes, though they were never as good as Sarah's. The girls would explore the rocky beach, collecting shells and sea glass, while he worked on lighthouse maintenance. In the afternoons, he began teaching them practical skills: how to read tide charts, how to identify different types of seabirds, how to splice rope. They were quick learners, both of them, with James's curiosity, and he began to notice his artistic eye for detail. Emma loved to photograph everything with Sarah's old camera. Lily filled sketchbooks with drawings of the lighthouse, the sea, the gulls. On the 3rd day, William found Lily sitting on the rocks, drawing intently. He looked over her shoulder and caught his breath. She had captured the lighthouse perfectly, not just its physical form, but its feeling, its presence. Just like James used to do. That's very good, he said. Daddy taught me, Lily replied. He said art is about seeing with your heart, not just your eyes. William sat down beside her on the rocks. Your father was right about a lot of things. Things I was too stubborn to see. Lily looked at him with those green eyes, Margaret's eyes, James's eyes. He told us that you were a hero. That you saved people at sea. I tried to, but I couldn't save what mattered most. What was that? My family. Lily put down her pencil and took William's weathered hand in her small one. Maybe you still can. Sarah returned on the 4th day, looking more exhausted than when she'd left. But when she saw how the girls ran to hug William goodbye before greeting her, something in her face eased. Over the next weeks, a pattern emerged. Sarah would stay for a few days, then return to Rockport for treatments and to handle her affairs. The girls remained with William, and slowly, the lighthouse cottage became a home again. William enrolled them in Port Haven Elementary School. Every morning, he drove them the 30 minutes into town, and every afternoon, he was there to pick them up. He attended parent-teacher conferences and school concerts. He learned to braid hair badly and to check homework and to read bedtime stories. It was exhausting. It was terrifying. It was the most alive he'd felt in 20 years. The girls thrived. They made friends at school and joined the Saturday art class at Pastor Tom's church. They turned the sunroom of the cottage into a studio, filling it with paintings and drawings. Emma discovered a talent for photography, while Lily's skills with pencil and brush grew daily. And William changed too. He trimmed his beard. He bought new clothes. He started cooking real meals, following recipes Sarah left him. The cottage, which had been merely functional for so long, began to feel warm. There were children's rain boots by the door, artwork on the walls, laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent. But Sarah was fading. Each time she returned, she was thinner, weaker. She'd moved into the cottage permanently by November, unable to manage on her own anymore. William converted his ground floor study into a bedroom for her. He helped her with medications, prepared the bland foods she could tolerate, sat with her when pain kept her awake at night. One evening in early December, after the girls had gone to bed, Sarah called William to sit with her. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice weak but steady. "Will you adopt them? Legally? I've spoken to a lawyer. The papers are ready. But I need to know you're committed to this. To them." William looked at this brave woman who had driven her daughters to a stranger's doorstep out of desperation and love. "Sarah, these past 2 months. They've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. A reason to wake up in the morning. A chance to be better than I was. Is that a yes? That's a promise. I will take care of them. I will love them. I will not make the same mistakes I made with James." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "He would be so happy. He always hoped you'd reconcile. He used to drive past the lighthouse sometimes when we visited the coast. He'd sit in the car, looking at it, working up the courage to knock on your door. But he was afraid. We were both afraid," William said. "Afraid of admitting we were wrong. Afraid of being vulnerable. What a waste. But you have a second chance now. Don't waste this one." William signed the adoption papers the next day. Sarah's lawyer witnessed them, and just like that, William became a father again, this time to 2 granddaughters he'd known for less than 3 months. That night, he gathered the girls in Sarah's room and told them. They seemed to understand what it meant, even if they couldn't fully grasp the permanence of it. "So you'll be our daddy now?" Emma asked. "I'll be your grandfather," William corrected gently. "No one will ever replace your father. Or your mother. But yes, I'll take care of you. Forever." The storm came 2 weeks before Christmas. William had been tracking the weather system for days, a massive nor'easter barreling up the coast, promising high winds, heavy snow, and dangerous seas. He'd lived through dozens of such storms in his years at the lighthouse, but never with 2 children to worry about. He spent the day before preparing extra firewood stacked by the door, batteries for flashlights, the generator checked and fueled, food and water stored. Sarah was too weak to help, but she directed from her bed, her years as a mother giving her insight into what children would need during a power outage. The storm hit just after midnight. William woke to the sound of wind howling around the lighthouse like a living thing. He quickly checked the girls, both sleeping soundly, and Sarah, who was awake but comfortable. Then he did what keepers had done for 147 years. He climbed the lighthouse to watch the storm. The power was already out, but the lighthouse had backup generators. Its beam continued to sweep across the violent sea, a promise of safety in the chaos. Through the glass of the lantern room, William watched waves crash against the rocks with tremendous force. The wind was so strong that spray from the breakers reached almost to the top of the lighthouse. And then he saw it, a light on the water. A boat, far too small for these conditions, struggling in the storm. William grabbed the radio. "Coast Guard, this is Keeper's Point Lighthouse. I have a vessel in distress, approximately 1 mile east of the point. Appears to be a fishing boat, maybe 30 feet. Request immediate assistance. Keeper's Point, this is Coast Guard Station Port Haven. We're launching a rescue boat now. ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes in these seas could mean the difference between life and death." William watched helplessly as the fishing boat fought the waves. He could see figures on deck, barely visible in the storm. The boat's engine must have failed. It was drifting toward the rocks. Then he heard footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared, wrapped in a blanket. "Grandpa? I'm scared. The wind." "I know, sweetheart. It's a bad storm. But we're safe here. The lighthouse has survived much worse. Emma came to stand beside him, and he put his arm around her. Together, they watched the drama unfolding on the sea. "What's that boat doing?" Emma asked. "It's in trouble. The Coast Guard is coming to help." They watched as a spotlight appeared in the distance, the rescue boat. William had been on dozens of such rescues in his Navy days. He knew the danger, the skill required to approach a disabled vessel in these conditions. The rescue took 45 minutes. William and Emma watched the entire time, not speaking, as the Coast Guard crew pulled 3 fishermen from the stricken boat moments before it crashed into the rocks. When it was over, when the rescue boat headed back to port and the fishing boat had been pounded to pieces by the waves, Emma looked up at her grandfather. "The lighthouse saved them," she said. "They saw the light and knew where the rocks were." "That's what lighthouses do," William replied. "They warn of danger. They guide people home, like you did for me and Lily. And for Mama." William felt his throat tighten. From the mouth of a 10-year-old child, such simple wisdom. "Perhaps," he said softly. "Or perhaps you saved me." The storm raged for 2 more days. The power stayed out, but they managed. They cooked on the fireplace and told stories by lantern light. William taught the girls old sea shanties, and they taught him card games. Sarah listened from her room, her laughter mixing with theirs. On the 3rd day, the storm broke. The sky cleared to a brilliant blue, and the sun sparkled on the snow-covered rocks. William bundled the girls up, and they went outside to see the damage. The dock had lost several planks. A tree had fallen near the cottage. The beach was littered with debris from the sea. But the lighthouse stood firm, as it had for 147 years. Lily, always the artist, declared they should paint it. So they did, all 3 of them, standing in the snow with sketchbooks, trying to capture the lighthouse in the winter sun. William watched his granddaughters work, seeing James in every stroke they made, and felt something he hadn't felt in decades: peace. That evening, Sarah called them all to her room. She looked frail, almost transparent, but her eyes were calm. "I need to tell you girls something," she said. "I'm going to die soon. Maybe in a few days. Maybe a week." The girls climbed onto her bed, one on each side. They didn't cry. They'd known, of course. Children always know. "But here's the important part," Sarah continued, taking their hands. "I'm not afraid. Do you know why? Because I know you'll be okay. You have Grandpa William now, and he loves you. He'll take care of you." "We love him too," Emma said. "And we'll take care of him," Lily added. "When he's old and can't remember things." This made them all laugh, even Sarah. She looked at William. "Thank you for giving James back to me these last few months. Every time I see you with the girls, I see him. You're the father he always wanted you to be." "I should have been that father when he was alive," William said, his voice rough. "Maybe, but you're being it now. That's what matters." Sarah died 2 days before Christmas, peacefully in her sleep. William found her in the early morning, when he went to check on her before his dawn climb to the lighthouse. The girls took it with a courage that broke his heart. They'd had time to prepare, time to say goodbye. Sarah had made sure of that. The funeral was held at Pastor Tom's church. The small sanctuary was packed not just with Sarah's friends from Rockport, but with people from Port Haven who had come to know William and the girls over the past months. James's paintings lined the walls, borrowed from collectors and friends. William stood before a lighthouse at sunset, almost certainly Keeper's Point, and wept openly for the first time since Margaret had died. The girls stood beside him, each holding one of his hands, their small bodies warm and solid and real. After the service, after the visitors had left, after the casseroles and condolences had been delivered to the lighthouse cottage, William sat with Emma and Lily at the kitchen table. "What happens now?" Emma asked. "Now," William said, "we figure out how to live together. Will we stay here? At the lighthouse? Do you want to?" Both girls nodded vigorously. "Then we'll stay. This is your home now. Our home." And so they built a new life. It wasn't easy. There were hard days when the girls missed their parents so much they could barely function. There were times William felt completely overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising 2 growing girls. But there were good days too. Many of them. William learned to cook more than just grilled cheese and spaghetti. He learned to navigate the complex social dynamics of 5th-grade girls. He attended every school play, every art show, every parent-teacher conference. He taught them to sail the old dinghy that had belonged to James. He showed them how to read the weather, how to navigate by stars, how to respect the power of the sea. And they taught him things too. They taught him to laugh again. They taught him that it was okay to make mistakes, to apologize, to try again. They taught him that love wasn't about control or expectations, it was about acceptance and presence. The lighthouse became a place of life again. The girls' friends visited on weekends. There were sleepovers and birthday parties. The cottage rang with music and laughter. Emma continued with photography, developing a particular talent for seascapes. Lily's paintings grew more sophisticated, her style evolving but always carrying echoes of her father's work. And every evening, weather permitting, William would take the girls to the top of the lighthouse. They'd watch the sunset and the stars emerge. And he'd tell them stories about their father, about their grandmother, about the long line of keepers who had maintained this light. One evening in June, almost a year after they'd first arrived, Lily asked, "Grandpa, do you think Daddy and Mama can see us from heaven?" William considered this carefully. He'd never been particularly religious, but raising children had softened his skepticism. "I think love doesn't end," he finally said. "Your parents loved you more than anything. That love is still here, still part of you. So in a way, they're always with you." "I think so too," Emma said. "I feel it sometimes. Like when I take a good picture, I think Daddy would have been proud." "He would be," William assured her. "He is. Both your parents are proud of you. And so am I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light sweep across the darkening water. "Grandpa?" Lily said. "I'm glad Mama brought us here. I'm glad we found you." "I'm glad too," William replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life, you know. I was lost when you arrived. Alone and bitter and stuck in the past. You gave me a reason to look forward instead of back. That's what lighthouses do," Emma said, echoing the words from that stormy night months ago. "They guide people home." William pulled both girls close. "Yes," he whispered. "That's exactly what they do." 5 years passed. Emma and Lily grew into confident teenagers, still close despite their different interests. Emma had become an accomplished photographer, her work winning regional competitions. Lily's paintings had been featured in galleries in Portland and Boston. William was 80 now, still spry but definitely feeling his age. He'd officially retired as lighthouse keeper, but the Coast Guard let him stay in the cottage as long as he wanted. The lighthouse remained automated, but he still climbed it most mornings, though the 147 steps took longer now. The girls were 15, starting their sophomore year of high school. They'd grown into remarkable young women, kind, creative, strong. Every day, William saw James in them, in Emma's determination, in Lily's artistic vision, in both their compassionate hearts. On a September morning exactly 6 years after James's death, William woke to find both girls already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a large envelope. "What's this?" he asked, pouring coffee. "Open it," Emma said, excitement in her voice. Inside was a letter from the Maine Maritime Museum. They were planning a major exhibition called Lights Along the Coast, Maine's Lighthouse Heritage, and they wanted to feature the work of James Hartford. But they wanted more than just his paintings. They wanted the story of the keeper's son who became an artist, the story of reconciliation found too late, the story of a family rebuilt. And they wanted Emma's photographs and Lily's paintings to be part of the exhibition too. "What do you think, Grandpa?" Lily asked. "Should we do it?" William looked at the letter, then at his granddaughters. 6 years ago, he'd been a bitter old man, alone in a lighthouse, mourning a son he'd pushed away. Now he was surrounded by love, by purpose, by a second chance he didn't deserve but had been given anyway. "I think," he said slowly, "that your father's story deserves to be told. And I think showing how his legacy continues through you too would make him very proud." The girls squealed with excitement and began planning immediately. The exhibition would open in December, just before the holidays. Over the next months, they worked with the museum curators. They selected 30 of James's paintings from various collectors' lighthouse scenes from all along the Maine coast. Each one capturing not just the physical structure but the spirit of these sentinel lights. Emma contributed 24 photographs, dramatic seascapes shot from Keeper's Point, portraits of lobstermen and Coast Guard crews. Images of the lighthouse in all seasons and weathers. Her work showed technical skill beyond her years and a deep understanding of light and composition. Lily provided 15 paintings, her style clearly influenced by her father's but distinctly her own. Where James had used bold, confident strokes, Lily's work was more delicate, more introspective. She painted the lighthouse not as a monument but as a character, a presence with moods and memories. William's contribution was different. He wrote the story, all of it. The brilliant son who chose art over duty. The stubborn father who chose pride over love. The 20 years of silence. The unexpected arrival of 2 granddaughters. The reconciliation that came too late and yet, somehow, not too late at all. He didn't spare himself in the telling. He wrote honestly about his failures, his regrets, his bitter loneliness. But he also wrote about redemption, about how love could reach across death, about how children could heal wounds that time couldn't touch. Pastor Tom helped him with the writing, encouraging him to be vulnerable, to let people see not the admiral but the man. The exhibition opening was on December 10th. The museum had never seen such a crowd. Art critics came from Boston and New York. Local television stations covered it. But mostly, it was filled with regular people, lighthouse keepers and their families, Coast Guard veterans, residents of coastal towns who understood what these lights meant. William stood near the entrance, uncomfortable in a suit and tie, watching people view the exhibition. The paintings were arranged chronologically, showing James's development as an artist from his early 20s to just before his death. But interspersed throughout were Emma's photographs and Lily's paintings, creating a visual conversation between father and daughters across the boundary of death. The centerpiece was the painting that hung in William's cottage, the sunset view of Keeper's Point. Beside it hung Lily's most recent painting, the same lighthouse, the same angle, but at dawn instead of dusk. The beginning of a new day. Emma had contributed a photograph to complete the triptych, the lighthouse in a storm, its beam cutting through the darkness. She'd taken it during that first winter, during the nor'easter when they'd watched the Coast Guard rescue. Together, the 3 pieces told a story: sunset, storm, sunrise. Ending, trial, new beginning. A reporter approached William. "Admiral Hartford, how does it feel to see your son's work recognized like this?" William thought carefully before answering. "James was brilliant. I knew that even when I was too foolish to admit it. But this exhibition isn't really about me or my regrets. It's about him, his vision, his talent, his ability to see beauty and capture it. And it's about how that gift lives on through his daughters. Do you have any advice for other families dealing with estrangement?" William looked across the room to where Emma and Lily were talking animatedly with a gallery owner about their work. They'd grown so much in 6 years. They'd be applying to colleges soon, preparing to leave the lighthouse and make their own way in the world. The thought both terrified and thrilled him. "Don't wait," he said to the reporter. "Whatever the argument was, whatever principle you're standing on, it's not worth losing your family. Pride is a cold companion. Forgiveness is hard, but regret is harder. Pick up the phone. Write the letter. Show up at the door. Before it's too late." The reporter thanked him and moved on. William continued to wander through the exhibition, reading the comments visitors wrote in the guest book. "Your son's work touched my soul. Thank you for sharing your story. It gave me courage to call my daughter. The paintings are beautiful, but the story of redemption is even more beautiful." As the evening wound down, William found himself standing alone in front of James's earliest painting in the collection, a simple watercolor of a sailboat that he'd done at age 22, right before the great argument that had torn their family apart. He heard footsteps and turned to find an elderly woman approaching. She looked to be in her 80s, with kind eyes and silver hair. "I knew your son," she said. "I was his art teacher in high school. James Hartford was the most talented student I ever taught, but more than that, he was kind. He helped other students, encouraged them, shared his materials. He had a generous spirit. I wish I'd seen that," William said quietly. "I was so focused on what I thought he should be that I couldn't see who he actually was." "But you see it now," the woman said, gesturing to the exhibition. "You're honoring him now. That matters. I hope so. Those girls, they have his gift. But more than that, they have what he always wanted: your approval, your love, your presence. You gave them what you couldn't give him. That's not nothing." After she left, William stood there for a long time, thinking about her words. He had given Emma and Lily what he'd withheld from James. But James had made that possible. By falling in love with Sarah, by having children, by leaving behind not just paintings but a family. James had given his father a second chance. Emma and Lily found him there. They'd changed out of their formal dresses into jeans and sweaters, ready for the drive back to the lighthouse. "Ready to go home, Grandpa?" Emma asked. Home. The lighthouse had become that for all of them. A place of safety, of acceptance, of second chances. "Almost," William said. "There's one more thing I need to do." He led them outside to where his truck was parked. From the back, he pulled out a large wrapped package that he'd hidden there earlier. "I made something for you too," he said, suddenly feeling shy. "For your birthday next month, but I want you to have it now." The girls unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a large wooden box, beautifully crafted, with brass hinges and a small brass plaque that read, "The Hartford Family Keepers of the Light." Inside the box were treasures: James's early sketchbooks, letters he'd written to his mother, photographs of him as a child, report cards, school projects. William's own letters to James from his Navy days, before the rift. Margaret's jewelry. The logbooks from William's father's days as keeper. But there were new things too: Emma's first camera, Lily's first painting, school photos, birthday cards, dried flowers from Sarah's funeral. A family history, lovingly preserved. "This is everything I have of your father," William said. "Everything I should have treasured all along. And everything of you girls too. Your history, your heritage. When you go off to college, when you build your own lives, I want you to take this with you. So you'll always remember where you came from." Lily was crying. Emma's eyes glistened. They both hugged their grandfather fiercely. "We love you, Grandpa," Emma whispered. "We're so glad Mama brought us to you," Lily added. William held them close, these girls who had saved him, who had given meaning to his last years. Who had taught an old man that it's never too late to change, to love, to be better. "I'm the lucky one," he said. "You gave me a reason to climb those lighthouse stairs every morning. You gave me a reason to look forward instead of back. You gave me a family again." They drove home in comfortable silence, the exhibition's success warming them more than the truck's heater. As they approached Keeper's Point, the lighthouse beam swept across the dark water, steady and sure. William had climbed those stairs thousands of times in his life. As a boy, following his father. As a young man, before shipping out with the Navy. As a bitter old man, seeking solitude in the light. And now, he climbed them with his granddaughters, teaching them the keeper's duties, sharing the family legacy, passing on the torch. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, William made his evening climb alone. At the top, he stood in the lantern room, watching the beam rotate, listening to the eternal conversation between wind and waves. He pulled out a photograph he'd carried in his pocket all day: James at 10 years old, standing right here in this spot, grinning at the camera. Beside it, he placed a new photo: Emma and Lily at 15, standing in the same spot, wearing the same grins. "I'm sorry I failed you, son," William said to the wind and the darkness. "I'm sorry I wasn't the father you needed. But I promise you this: I will be the grandfather your daughters need. I will love them the way I should have loved you. And I will make sure they know every single day how proud you would be of them." The light swept around, illuminating everything and nothing, warning of danger, guiding travelers home. "Thank you," William whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to James, to Sarah, to God, or to the lighthouse itself. "Thank you for bringing them to me. Thank you for the second chance." A seagull cried in the distance. The waves crashed against the rocks below. The light continued its eternal rotation. And in the keeper's cottage, two girls slept peacefully, safe and loved, their dreams filled with lighthouses and oceans and the father they'd lost but would never forget. William descended the stairs slowly, his old knees protesting each step. But his heart was lighter than it had been in decades. Tomorrow, he would wake at dawn and climb again. He would make breakfast for his granddaughter's pancakes, because he'd finally mastered them. He would drive them to school and pick them up in the afternoon. He would help with homework and listen to their stories about friends and classes and teenage dramas that seemed impossibly important. He would be present. He would be patient. He would be the grandfather, the father he'd learned to be too late for James, but just in time for Emma and Lily. The lighthouse would stand watch over them all, as it had for 147 years. A beacon in the darkness. A symbol of safety. A reminder that no matter how far you drift, there's always a light to guide you home. And in the end, isn't that what family is? A light that never goes out, calling us home, no matter how far we've wandered or how long we've been lost. William locked the door and turned off the lights, leaving only the small lamp burning in the window, a tradition as old as the lighthouse itself, a welcome for travelers. A sign that someone was home, someone was waiting, someone cared. In the morning, the sun would rise over the Atlantic, painting the lighthouse in gold and crimson. Emma would photograph it, as she did every Sunday. Lily would sketch it in her journal. And William would stand between them, his hands on their shoulders, his heart full. 3 generations of Hartfords, keepers of the light, watching over the sea and each other. The light continues. Always, the light continues. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more heartwarming audiobook narrations. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that it's never too late for second chances, for forgiveness, for coming home. Remember, love is the lighthouse that guides us through the darkest storms. Keep your light burning.